ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Cropper here. I have a question from Sam26100. He asks how he should argue against Thunderfoot. Now, I replied to Sam, and I had confused Thunderfoot with thou art that. But as far as economics goes, apparently Thunderfoot's no better than thou art that. Now, Sam describes himself as a convert to objectivism, but he says he's not sure how to argue against the stuff that Thunderfoot throws at him as far as economics goes. And he gives a couple of quotes which we'll go over here. Thunderfoot says, "Many people assume that the market is an equilibrium, or that kinetic barriers do not exist in the system. Both assumptions are false. Consequently, many extrapolations made by economists are of little value." Now, is it an assumption that the market is an equilibrium? Now, I don't know what the hell he means by kinetic barriers, but I assume that he's got some sort of Marxism there. He's from Britain. He does buy into the hype and stuff that you hear on CNN and stuff a lot. He's an atheist, and that's about as much credit as you can give him, apparently. He's clueless on economics. But when he says that many people assume the market's in equilibrium, no, the market's not in equilibrium. The market reaches equilibrium in prices and material and needs and wants and so on. It isn't an equilibrium. It's absurd. I think that, we'll see in the next quote here, Thunderfoot is completely ignorant of historical facts, the facts on the ground. He doesn't have any idea what it would mean for a market to create equilibrium, and if he saw equilibrium, he probably wouldn't know it. He probably wouldn't know equilibrium if it equalized him. Now, his next quote, which we'll be able to finish our business from the first quote with, says, "Given the metastable and chaotic nature of market space," in scare quotes, and then in parentheses, elements of unpredictability, "what one does by financing a state is," okay, so financing a state is to do a certain thing, but let's look at this first part of the sentence again. "Given the metastable and chaotic nature of market space." Now, how can it be both metastable and chaotic at the same time? I don't know, because I don't know what the hell he means by metastable or kinetic. And I doubt that they are being applied in a valid way. I assume, from the jargon he's using here and the stuff he's saying, like for example, saying that the market is not in equilibrium, I assume that he's full of crap, and I would want him to explain himself a little bit better, but he does, so let's go forward just a little bit. "Given the metastable and chaotic nature of market space, what one does," which are elements of unpredictability, "what one does by financing a state is purchase kinetic stability or inertia." Okay, so the free market is unstable, it's unpredictable, it's chaotic, and a state is predictable. Wrong. Sorry about that. That's completely wrong. There's no such thing as a marketplace unless there's a state. As the Greeks said, we have freedom because we have laws. We obey the law. We don't obey men. If you're to obey men, you're not free. If you obey laws, freedom is possible. And you'll find that in every dictatorship in history. You think that Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany were overflowing with laws. No, they were dictatorships of whim. You'll find that everywhere in history, that as soon as dictatorship comes to the fore, law goes. Okay? Law is there to create and protect the marketplace. The marketplace is a creature created by agreement and law, not by fiat, anarchy, chaos, instability, and predictability. Okay? So this right here is a complete misunderstanding of what creates freedom, what creates prosperity, what creates rights. Now, if you want to just point to the people in Africa in the 13 and 1400s who were trading for weapons and stuff from the Europeans, and the Europeans come down and they trade with the people there in the jungle, and the people in the jungle leave their gold, and the people come and look, and if they agree on the price, they take the gold and leave the goods. If that's all you mean by a market, then what the hell are you doing talking about free markets and capitalism and such? A market is a little bit more than two people meeting and trading stuff. That's a barter economy. But if you want to talk about a free market, and if you're talking about capitalism, and you're talking about libertarianism, and you're talking about statism and anarchy, then you have to say that a market's a little bit more than a person trading some chicken for some grain or something. So the markets that I'm talking about, the markets that it's useful to talk about, the only markets it's useful to talk about in the context of free markets and libertarianism, are markets that are created by law. Larger markets, markets larger than just barter economies. Now, he says that by financing a state, you purchase stability or inertia. That's a different thing. Inertia is the tendency to not change in movement. Stability would be more like the tendency to not move. But even if you said some moving thing could be more stable than not or whatever, give him the benefit of the doubt on that. No, the state is arbitrary. It does not have to take account of the facts on the ground when it produces legislation or orders people to do this or that. It doesn't have to take account of the facts on the ground, and who's to say it's going to take correct account of the facts on the ground? As Yaron Brook has made the point in the past, it's not a question of setting the right interest rate for the Fed. You know, the Federal Reserve has to set the interest rate for the nation's overnight borrowing thing or whatever. He says it doesn't matter what the interest rate is. If the government's setting it, it's always going to be wrong. There's no way to get the right interest rate. You can't argue what 10,000 steps do we go through and what 900 variables do we consider to figure out what the interest rate should be. You cannot set the interest rate correctly. Same thing with government intervention. It is not possible for the government to intervene in an efficacious way. Having stayed out of it, more wealth would have been produced and conserved to begin with than if they would have gotten in. Now, that assumes the protection of rights is a basic background. As I said earlier, we are talking about markets where law is what has created them and where there's a little bit more than barter. So as long as you're assuming a background of individual rights being protected from force and fraud, any further intervention is an unnecessary, counterproductive destruction of wealth. The state cannot take account of all the facts on the ground. Now, let me just say, this is not to say that the free market can, or does, or should, or needs to take account of all the facts on the ground. No, many people in the free market screw up all the time. That's not the question. It's their problem. The free market gets it done because hundreds of people screw up and hundreds of other people do it a different way and are able to succeed, and then that narrows down to 50 and 20 and then 3. And the reason the free market works is because it doesn't guarantee success or equilibrium. No, the free market is not a system of equilibrium. It is an organic system, if you will, a Darwinian system where when you see one tiger or elephant in the forest fall and die of disease, it doesn't disappear from the forest. It gets reused. It turns into little bugs and insects that are, you know, because they multiply on the corpse, and then those are eaten by birds, and then there are more birds to be eaten, to lay more eggs and be eaten by snakes, and then the snakes can be eaten by the tigers, and there's another tiger, or whatever, you know, or else it fertilizes the plants and the elephants have more to eat, or, you know, it doesn't disappear. And if you can't see the exact similarity in the economy, I'll just point it out quickly. A company doesn't disappear when it fails, okay? The workers go somewhere else. The line of credit very likely will go to somebody else. The material in the factory, unless it's completely useless and worn out, may be sold, and even if it's useless and worn out, it can be recycled. The land the factory or whatever sits on, or the place that it's leasing can be leased out again, the factory torn down, the land used for something. It's not the case that the free market runs everything perfectly. But it is the case that no one can run everything perfectly, and therefore the government shouldn't try. So, a state does not bring stability. Actually, a state, as far as economics is concerned, if the state does any actions in the economy, it brings instability.